Thank you and good evening. I want to thank everybody, for taking time to come earlier during the day. I know everybody's busy with work and commitments, and I know even though this is what you signed up for, I'm very grateful for y'all being here regardless. I know it's a challenge having talked to y'all today and every day. So I wanted to kind of reorient ourselves with where we are in our budget and priority setting process. And hopefully ease a couple concerns I've heard. So we started earlier this year because of our 5-year forecast. It's showing budget deficit. So we're in a good financial position, and we're starting earlier because we want to make sure the town remains in a good financial position. So we're at a spot right now where you've seen the 5-year scenarios. We've talked about it. And here we are in March, where the board has given us 4 scenarios to consider, and the idea.
Expand that. Can you? Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
Good. All right. Yeah. I appreciate you speaking up. By the noises, I think you weren't the only one. We're at a spot where we've got 4 scenarios, and the idea of the day is to kind of narrow it down, ideally to 2 scenarios. And I want to, again, ease a couple fears. One, the board is not committing to any of these scenarios, to 1, to 2, to any, by narrowing them down. What it's doing is just kind of moving the process forward. And same thing with next meeting. If you end up with one scenario that you want me to create a budget on, you are not committing at that point in time to this is the budget, that's it, et cetera. What we're doing is it allows me as the manager to kind of create a budget. And by then we'll have hopefully more firmer numbers. There's still numbers that we just don't have, whether it's insurance numbers, new vendor updates, things like that. We just don't have that. We have more information than we did last time, but we're gonna have less information now than we do next time. So I wanna hopefully ease your concerns there. You're not committing from here to eternity. We're just simply moving the process forward so that we can continue that. So in April, I'll submit the board a budget, and then May, if the board would like to, is we can go in deeper. We can look at every line item, we can talk to the departments. That's an optional. And then in June, we hopefully work through any issues and the board feels comfortable approving a budget. Does that make sense? Any questions? Okay. So with that being said, I want to invite Ms. Gross up to come and hopefully lead us through the 4 scenarios, answer any questions, and then we'll do a handoff with Mr. Walton, who can help facilitate any issues that arise and hopefully get to a place where the board's comfortable.
Okay, we, during the last meeting, the 4 scenarios, I guess, that council had asked to come up with here, based on what we had. We looked at different growth rates as we went through the budget, and I presented the 5-year plan, and that's basically what we were talking about through the last budget meeting was the 5-year plan. And the growth rate that we had come up with prior, yes?
I'm going to ask the same thing. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can actually do that to presentation mode, sorry.
Well, yeah, there you go.
There you go. I'm sorry. It was 2.54, I think. So we went back to the model and studied it a little bit more, and we actually were able to bump it up to actually a 3.54%, I believe it is. Let me see what the first one says here. 3.54, yes, I was correct. So I use that as just a year-over-year growth, and considering not a revaluation, no matter what happens, we're going to have revenue growth of 3.54%. Then I looked at our expenses, and actually we dropped down from the prior year slightly, but it was actually not. I think our projection came down quite a little bit from what we were looking at for this fiscal year, 24 to 25. And then we were escalating on that 25 number to get out on the out years. So looking at it, I don't know if we want to review any of that before we get into these four scenarios, or we just jump right into the four scenarios. But in looking at those, the four scenarios that council asked for were, the first one was, if the town were to adjust the tax rate this coming fiscal year to cover what we would need over the next 4 years. So that is what this scenario is. No, actually, this is the scenario that we are in. We're in like a $8.7 million deficit if we do nothing year over year. We run out of the ARPA funds here. We did actually split the CIP into two pieces. The part that we considered routine, that we would have to spend on operational type things, and those which would be enhanced. And what those would be were things that we could push off to another year. Like this piece here would represent rebuilding our shelter over here and things like that. Adding new parts of the greenway and, those more expensive items that we could push off another year. Not things like operationally, like replacing vehicles for police. It's very heavily relying on the CIP itself, which we went through on the prior two meetings. So the first scenario that I talked about, that was if we adjusted that this 25-26 budget, during that, and it was going to take place in the revaluation year. We did nothing in 24-25 for this coming year, and we did that adjustment when we did the revaluation. It would take a tax increase of 11.75%, which I don't think, that would bring our tax rate up to about 30%, 30.35%, and I'm not sure that anyone would want to go with this option, but it would take care of those operational issues, and at the end, you can see that there's actually a little bit of a deficit there, but it does start giving you a reserve, extras to use towards these numbers down here. Still not covering all of the additional CIP items, but does cover some of them. The second scenario, this is to adjust the tax rate to cover half of the deficit, which is that $8.7 million, or 8.667. Half of that deficit, and the other in the revaluation year, and the other piece of it would be covered by fund balance. So you can see that at the end of increasing your taxes almost 6%, it's 5.88%, you would have a tax rate of 34.48.
Not six.
Or 22, I'm sorry. 22.48. I was going from the past, the previous, it was 30-something, so 24.48%. And you would use about 4.3 million of fund balance to cover those operational expenses. Still increasing, but it wouldn't start until that revaluation year. The other thing that we can't really project, and I haven't heard anything for the revaluation, what's going to happen? Will it go up? Will it go down? How is that going to affect our, I kept constant. You can see the tax base in every one of these scenarios keeps the tax base constant, to grow the tax increase.
Marcia,
Yes.
in all of these different scenarios, have you done a schedule on how much per household, average household, this would, what would this mean to the average?
I do have that tax calculator, and I can show you what that would be.
Yeah.
Let's go through these, and then I'll show you how much those would be into each one. Okay.
For in the retreat, Bert, you said that Mecklenburg next year is looking at a 60% increase roughly?
Revaluation that's already effective this year was 65%.
5%. Do you happen to know what theirs was 4 years ago, just off the top of your head?
I don't, but I think it would be more like half of that.
Okay. 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 All right, sorry, I was just trying to.
And then this third scenario, this was a tax increase to cover the entire deficit, or to cover the deficit over this current year here, just in the deficit in '25, so that we come out just about even. You'd have $14,000 over what you need, but truly it comes out close. I mean, I didn't want to come out to pennies. That would take a 5% tax increase, but you would still come out a 5% tax increase in this year. It would create tax revenue in the out years, but you would still be looking at using 3.756 in fund balance if these projections are correct. You know, you would create this extra tax revenue in the out years, but you would still be coming up a little bit short, $3.7 million short. And then in the fourth one, it takes a little bit of a different approach where you take a 3-cent increase in 24-25 budget, and then a 3-cent increase for a total of 6 in the following year. And you can see that the extra tax of $700,000 here, that's the 3 cents, and then twice that amount in this year on the out years for those extra taxes. And that deficit then becomes 3.5 million. And in all these, in all of these scenarios, the town is actually sitting in a really nice position as far as we're coming into this with about $10 million, I would say, of fund balance into this next fiscal year, in this one here, of fund balance. And that puts us in a very good position to be able to use some of it if we need to or want to, and without jeopardizing the position of the town. But it also, gives you the opportunity to get projects completed as well. So, I think that this is critical. No one knows what's going to happen next year, but we are in a crunch knowing that costs are continually increasing. People are continually, their salaries are going up, and it's harder and harder to get talented individuals and pay them and keep them, in these positions. I mean, the town has experienced some problems, just in the position that, I had held. And it gets difficult to do this, and you don't want to be in those positions. So in order to keep that talent, it's expensive. And I feel like, addressing the problem and looking at it and trying to plan for it now is truly the position the town wants to be in versus, saying, oh, we have this cushion. And, I would look at the cushion as being able to do your big projects if you want them. But that's my 2 cents. But any questions here? I know you wanted to look at the tax calculator.
Have you sent this to us already?
Yes.
In the report last Friday. Maybe.
Oh, last Friday?
Alex's report on, no, actually came out Thursday last week at,
So the 5%,
cent, not percent.
Where?
yeah, so the 5% in the scenario 3, I think.
Scenario 3, there we go, 5%.
That, to make the 13,000 break-even mark, it's because we're using effectively 1.3 million of fund balance to meet that, right?
You're using ARPA funds. That's the last amount of ARPA that we have, and we may not even have that much. If we have the option this year of, we budgeted to take less than this, but we can take more. And let me explain that. We budgeted based on police salaries. There's, it's a mix of different things. I don't know, I didn't create last year's budget, so I can't say exactly how the number got to be exactly what it was. But based on the current trend that we have right now on the tranches, when I say the expenditures that are put in for reimbursement, we will go over the reimbursement. Now, but all that does, we're not using it to spend it on other things. What it would do is turn those funds from restricted ARPA into unrestricted fund balance if you pull them out, because we use them for police salaries in fiscal year 24-25. Or you can leave them, we can stop at what we budgeted at and leave them in there for the following year to pull into that budget year. Either way, it's the same.
Yeah, I mean, so for all practical purposes, I realize it's ARPA, which has some different rules around it, but for all practical purposes, we're gonna be using 1.3 of our savings.
Yes.
Okay, just with the 5%. So if everything stayed the same next year, assuming nothing else changed, to break even next year, we would need
Million.
another 4 cents. So we would be at 9%, or 9 cents.
And then you have your revaluation.
I'm
Yeah, and
assuming all
that's-
things stay the same. There's no evaluation, no nothing. Okay, yeah, okay, all right.
Go to the tax calculator. I hope this one has the part where it does the individuals. If not, I'll have to, yes, okay.
Yeah, you sent that to us.
So if we did a 5% increase, I can't really, let me see, let me try and make this bigger. 5% increase would be $50 to a taxpayer.
For a $100,000 home, which is our.
Oh, wait a minute, that's not right. Yes, I'm sorry, I apologize. What did we say? It was 434. Or I thought that number was in there. Okay, so $217. So the one was 11%, I think. I have it printed in front of me here, so let me just pull them off of here. So for scenario one, I'll just read them off to you then. Scenario one was 11.75. So that would be $510, 510.14, so let's just say $510. Scenario two was 5.88. That's $255.29. Scenario three is 217. Scenario four is 130 in the first year and 130 in the second year. So 260 from year two on out. So 130 and then 260 in the second year. Well, an additional 130, I should say.
I hate to ask, but can you put 9% in there, just for fun.
391.
That's
391.
All righty. Any questions from Marcia or anything else you want to present to us, Marcia?
I think I'm good.
I mean, I've got other questions. I mean, do you have the tax calculator, the other spreadsheet that you were using?
This one here? Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So with this one here, I mean, what would 5% plus 30%, 30% reeval look like?
Okay, so there's 5% and a 30% revaluation. I gotta do a quick calculation on the side here. Oh, I locked this down.
Okay, never mind.
Well, let's just do it, we'll eyeball it here. Let's see. It's about 2.4 million. 30% of 2.4 is what? About 800,000, is that right? Okay.
A little about 750.
Okay, and then what's our final line down there?
So it increased at 1,229,081.
Per household, is that,
No, that's total for the town.
oh, for the town?
Okay.
It was, originally, it would generate 4.5 million, 4.56, this number here, and then this is the new tax,
Or it's one
ad
point
valorem, new ad valorem tax.
So even in that scenario, based off of what we just said, with the ARPA funds running out, assuming the projections and everything like that there, we would break even this year with a 5%. Next year, we would be roughly 1.3 million in the hole. And if we got, assuming nothing else changed,
Click
with
off.
a 30% increase in reval, we would break even next year, right? That's about right?
Yeah. Because we were short, on that other scenario, it was like 1 point,
But, may I interject this related?
Yeah.
I think, Steve, you're on to something that's important to at least talk
1.14.
about, and that is the assumption that we've had to make, and I understand why, is a constant tax base of $2.4 billion. That's that first line under assumes. But if Mr. Walton experience in seeing Mecklenburg County is even half true in Union County, you said 30, I did 25% reval. The numbers just change dramatically. So it feels, and that's why I suggested last meeting, have a scenario that truly only adjusts taxes when the tax base changes, so you'll know what you're working toward for the next 4 years. I don't love it because it can be perceived as sort of tucking a tax increase as your home value goes up. And I don't love that feeling, but at least it does give you a true sense of what the next 4 years might look like. If you just increase the tax base 25%, not 30 and not 65, then you're pocketing $1.2 million of tax revenue next year. So I get the constant tax base.
Say that again?
If you have a flat tax rate, keep 18.6,
Okay.
0.186. And if the reval takes you up 25%, not 30 or not 65, then if my math, quick math is right, then you pick up another $1.18 million in revenue by leaving a constant tax rate. Now, that's a tax increase because you've left it constant when everybody's value went up. That's why does that make sense?
Makes sense what you're saying. When I did the math, that It
Yeah,
was not the math that came out.
And my math could be subject, I just did it real quick, but a $2.45 billion tax base times 1.25%, which is 25% growth, equals a $3.06 billion tax base times 0.186 is 5.7 million versus, again, those are numbers, I'm boring everybody. But my point is, and my numbers could be off, but the point is, I wonder, I don't know the answer, I wonder if it's not better to discuss tax increases in the context of a reval year, because you'll know what your tax revenues will be, instead of going a lot of trouble this year trying to guess what the reval is gonna be. The next year, I don't know, it just feels odd to me. I don't
I
know,
mean, that's
just
kind
for
of
what
where,
it's worth.
that's kind of what, I mean, if 5% breaks us even this year, I was just kind of looking at what breaks us even for next year.
I'd like to interject one thing. Next year, you're gonna be fighting, or not fighting, but you'll be looking at a revenue neutral rate,
What?
a revenue neutral rate. And if you raise taxes for next year, and you're trying to keep a revenue neutral rate for 25, 26, on a higher rate for 24, 25,
I got
rather
lost.
than leaving it what it is.
I got lost in that, sorry, that
Yeah.
was my fault. Did you understand?
No, I didn't understand
Okay.
that.
Go ahead, say that again.
What would be the result of that?
A higher rate,
Yeah,
Higher rate this year to,
and a higher neutral rate as well. Don't you agree? I mean, it's, you know, because here you are with this rate, you're trying to, you have a lower, you have your base here, you have a rate here. They adjust your base in this year, and now you're having to bring it to this level instead of this level.
But, yeah, confused still. It's probably me, but,
Well, okay, your tax base is here, and your tax rate is here.
right,
Your tax base goes up to here.
so your tax rate has to lower next year to be revenue neutral.
Right, to get you down to here. But if in fact your tax rate puts you here,
Well, what we did a couple,
revenue neutral rate is higher.
well, to me, revenue neutral is important to know, and you have to show that in the budget process to the citizens, but it's irrelevant as to meeting your budget. I mean, we did the revenue neutral, published it last time we raised revenue, but we raised revenue by not keeping a revenue neutral rate. We went from
Right.
1.2
We went below.
0.21 to 1.86, which was higher than the revenue neutral, if I'm not mistaken, right?
We're seeing now, though, what it's clear that I'm not, I don't, you know, but I'm just saying, I can't see without major cuts, the town being able to keep it at that level.
well, I mean, we could pay it out of fund balance. But then we would, next year, we would either have to raise, we don't know what the the rebalance would be. So we could end up in, next year, having to even with the reval, having to raise taxes.
I mean, if the reval comes up short.
Well, last time, I think I was talking with Brad, and he said 20%. And I did the numbers with your spreadsheet, and with that, it only generated like $750,000 extra dollars of tax revenue. And then with that 750,000, I mean, we still had to raise taxes even with a 20% tax increase, because we were still basically 3 cents short next year. And really, that was assuming this year's budget. Next year, without the ARPA funds, we would have to raise, even at 20%, you'd have to raise it to cover the 1.3 million that we have in ARPA funds this year. So, I mean, we're back to that 9% to make things work out.
All right.
Is there anything you want up on this screen in particular?
Now, why don't we turn it over to Kurt, and
Okay.
you're gonna stay around, aren't you, Marcia?
Yes. Mhm.
Why don't you leave it on? Maybe 4.
Okay, okay. Whoops, that is 4. Okay.
Brad, this doesn't directly address your point, but for next year, the revaluation year, maybe it's clear to control for the number, the 11,904? Is that the right one? Or the 11,548, I guess, rather than the rate? Because and just because scenario 4, I think, illustrates it the best, it is hard to know what the 3 cents really is in a revaluation year. It's probably not low, but it may be right on point. But if you bifurcate the two and deal with this year, and then next year say, our goal for the budget is to generate revenue of 11.5, instead of our goal or our plan is to raise it 3 cents, then that way, it seems like you're locking in on the 3 cents, which is understandable, but that may not come to pass. It may be 50% reval, or it may be 20, and 3% is not enough. 3 cents isn't enough. So I don't know if that helps at all.
You're just saying that's not probably the best way to look at it. That's what you're
I think for the upcoming year, starting July 1, it is best to look at it relative to tax rate, because you know what your assessed value is reasonably going to be. But for next year, after reval, at this point, it really is a shot in the dark. So I wouldn't get too set on any rate. I would get more set on what's the right general fund bottom line for you, and control for that. That makes sense?
I think it does.
So just process, as Alex reviewed at the beginning, you're not locked into anything right now. The goal of this process has been to give Alex direction so that when it gets to particularly May, there are no surprises for you. You won't have to wonder, well, where did that number come from? Where did that tax rate come from? We will have gone through the different permutations of where we are. So there's still time to look at expenses. Revenues always travel earlier than expenses because they're more known than expenses are at this point. And so you have another session next Monday if you need it to continue this discussion. But I think my question would be, what information do you need that you haven't seen, or what's not clear to you relative to these scenarios? Are there other scenarios you want to look at? Are there scenarios you can eliminate? Are there scenarios you know you're not going to want to consider? And we work backwards from there. So I think I and the staff are more than willing to help talk through and answer any questions you've got. I think it's probably time for you to ask us any questions you've got that would help you kind of narrow down where you want to head for the next, particularly the next 2 budgets, 2 fiscal years.
All right, so we got 4 scenarios, and our directive is to either get it down to 2 and then ultimately down to 1. So I agree with Marcia, scenario number 1, I don't think anybody wants to support that, but if they do, speak now.
I proposed that scenario to see the number, was shocked about how big it was. So I don't think anybody wanted that on there except me, so I'm good to remove
Oh,
that.
you were the guy?
I was the guy, yeah.
Okay.
It's okay. Again,
I'm okay. I admit it, I was asking, but it was hypothetical, but.
hypothetical.
Well, appreciate you standing up for that. All right, number 1's out.
And
Number
we
one's
would
out.
throw him out in front and use him as a human shield when people came,
Right.
if we voted for that.
Can you pull up number 2 there, Kurt?
Marcia probably can.
I got it right
Is
here.
it just, okay.
Down. That was to start it in, cover half of it with fund balance and half of it tax increase and do it during the reval year.
And the tax increase would
And
be,
it wouldn't hit until the reval year.
In all of
They-
these scenarios,
it
can
wouldn't
I
hit
ask
till
about
the
the
reval?
expenditures?
We would do nothing in 24, 25. We would start it in 25, 26.
So we would just use what's in the bank to cover the budget.
which would be 1.2 million? Yeah, 1.5 second year.
Well, the total for the 4 years, it shows you what that total is. It's 4.339. So we use altogether in those 4 years, about 4.4 million.
Can you walk us through the forecasted expenditures? How did you get to that number?
Those,
And you don't have to go to the details, but I assume you had to use a
5.7.
CPI of some sort or a,
Historical, 5.7.
we went through year over year what we increased, just historical year over year what the increases were in each of the departments.
but that doesn't
It was-
take does that take into consideration?
The CPI is on the biggest expense we have is salaries, and every year the salaries are adjusted by CPI. So it would have been an average of the past 4 years of salaries. So that comes out, it was, I don't remember what it was.
5.6 or
Does it
5.3?
take into consideration the fuel costs for the police department or the asphalt that we need to buy? Are we getting, it's
Yes.
probably getting a lot less.
That
Still,
does
it's the
do
same
that.
amount
There
of
were,
money.
there were some increases in the CPI that Alex and KP put in for those. I don't know what they used, though. Do you remember what it for the paving and stuff?
I think for all on the CIP, for all expenditures, we use the traditional or the historical rate, 2.5%. That's in between 2 and 3%. It doesn't account for expenditure-specific historical increases, but just in totality.
We're gonna get a lot less. We're gonna budget, say, $1.5 million for asphalt. We're gonna get a lot less asphalt for the same amount of money. So if we wanted to keep up with the number that the consultant gave us to keep up with the roads, to keep them maintained well, we're gonna still need to cover more asphalt. Is that considered in there?
It's gonna be, it's escalated at that number, that's all I can give you, at the 2.5%.
No.
Kevin, is that,
So
is
no.
that is that an accurate guess for the increase in costs for our asphalt?
So, I know based off this huge, or the big spike in inflation that we saw coming into this fiscal year, obviously we've got the recommended $1.25 million budget that was kind of formulated 2-3-ish years ago based on those asphalt prices then. Now it's looking closer to about 10 years down the road to maintain that 70 PCI, looking closer to about 1.5 million further down the road. I think the 1.25 million will start to, I wish I had the graph to show, but it starts to be negated about 5 years down the road from now with a 3% inflation.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions or
Well,
thoughts on scenario 2?
well, I'll just talk about, from looking at all the scenarios. When I first saw it, I appreciate all the thought that went into this, but the one scenario that I didn't see that I would like to see is, every negotiation is about compromise. And I don't see, I'd like to, tell Alex and the citizens that, hey, we're looking at our operating expenses and we're gonna either keep them the same, reduce them some, but when you're gonna have a 5% increase in taxes and you hold the line everywhere else, you know, everybody knows the cost of asphalt's going up, the cost of salary's going up, everything's going up, but the prudent thing to do with the rest of your money is look at somewhere ways where you can save money. That's what you do in your business, your personal life, things like that. So, you know, that's the scenario I would like to give to Alex is, you know, look at ways you can save money, 1%, 2%, whatever it happens to be. You know, when Kurt asked us about, called us prior to the retreat, you know, that's what I told him. Is, you know, that's what I was looking for. So just to put it out there, that's the scenario I'm looking for. If there's a tax increase and we need it to cover, keep our level of services where they are, we just need to look at where can we cut expenses.
And I think, Mayor, that could be added to any of the scenarios.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think it's just a matter of stating that in whichever scenario or scenarios you choose, that look happens probably for you in May. Alex would be looking at it in between now and then.
Well, as Kurt said, any questions on scenario number 2, or y'all want to move on to number 3?
Well, the logic in that one fails if the logic in the first one fails, right? It's do nothing this year, wait to an unknown revow, and begin doing it in the revow years. So I would think you would think the same thing, Kurt. You're not really solving current year issues. You're waiting a year. So I would say that one should come off too. In favor of the next 2 might be the 2 we send forward, but that's my thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, my advice would be to not wait on dealing with the upcoming year. It ultimately kind of goes back to how much fund balance you're comfortable having or not having. And that's a pretty big draw on where you've been historically over those years. So I would agree with that.
The other thing that I'd like to ask Alex to do is a scenario if the John Deere property does sell in the next 6 months. Now we have 3-4 million. I know, Brad, you like the idea of leasing it and holding it on for 5 years and then it's worth 4 million, and I did like that idea, but do we need that 3 million now to hold our tax rate and not have to get into fund balance? So I'd like, you know, that'd be something I'd like to, a scenario.
I'd like to ask, I mean, just if it's possible, could we get kind of just, you know, keeping everything the same, maybe a just chart of 10 numbers, like if the revow is 10%, it'll generate this much money. If it's 20%, it'll generate this money, all the way up to, I don't know, 80%, just to take in, so we can have some numbers to kind of look at. Because I mean, if the revow was, you know, 30% next year, we would still be in the hole. We would still have to raise taxes next year. So that's, but it's hard to, without seeing those numbers and having something right in front of me, I'd like to know what those numbers are so we can kind of see how bad it would be based off of what potential tax or revow would be. And then my other thing is that, I mean, Union County, if they're thinking about doing a revow next year, they gotta be thinking about what they think the numbers are gonna be. Is there somebody we could reach out to and ask them, hey, what's your best guess?
Yeah, we tried that. They wouldn't say a word.
They wouldn't say a word.
Yeah, we were like, come on, can you give us a hint? And they said, no, they got to, and I get it from their standpoint. They don't want the word to kind of, they don't know yet, and they don't want,
No Facebook.
they don't want
post.
misunderstandings happening.
Gotcha. Okay, well,
Does it have to be based on appraisals or?
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think they can't just say we want to do 30%. Right, they have to actually, because you can appeal your reevaluated.
yeah, I was just kind of wanting something to throw a dart at, so to speak. Just something.
maybe use Zillow.
Yeah.
Look at like how much home values have appreciated.
You probably wouldn't have it until October, November, something like that,
Of 25?
of '24, effective for for January 1, July 1, 25.
All right, so Kurt, it's your recommendation, and Brad's as well, skip scenario number 2, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's go to number 3 then, see what you think.
Well,
Number 3.
I think the goal for tonight is to look to 2. Now, we could keep going through. I'm not saying stop
did it.
talking, but if we're getting 2, those are the 2 we could send forward with Alex, with the caveat that Alex should also do a spend analysis of how to be more efficient in the departments and all that. Literally, if we end, is this scenario 3? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's with a 5% or 5-cent increase. Yeah. If we end the next 4 years at 3.7 in the hole, taking our fund balance from 11 to 8, I think we've done a pretty good job. I mean, personally.
3 and 4, so 4.
As we said before, I appreciate the revenue projections and how Marcia moved them up after I thought they were a little bit low, and I think she came back and feels comfortable with. And I think the spend side is 5 point something. I just get really nervous about, I know we have to, projecting out 4 or 5 years.
That huge unknown.
Well, with the revow particularly as
That's
an
the big
unknown.
unknown.
And unknown about revenue and sales tax and investment and interest rates. You have to do this. But sometimes I look at that $3.8 million number, I think that's awful, but when we get there, it's gonna be different. Maybe worse, but likely better, I would think, if we manage our finances well.
On number 3, is, to cover the budget deficit, how much would that increase be as far as since 5? Same with 4? No, that would be 3 and 3, so it'd be 6 over 2 years.
Sorry, that's allowed.
Anybody, Brad's recommendation is, what I heard Brad say is, let's give 3 and 4 scenarios to Alex. But is anybody ready to narrow that down to one of those 2?
Well, I will speak to 4 because I think it was my idea. And so what I had in mind isn't, and it doesn't have to be locked in for year 2 being 3%. But the way I'm looking at it is, I look at it from like a balance sheet standpoint, and maybe for a company, which is wrong. But if you go back 10 years ago, we had maybe 10 million in fund balance and it was all cash, right? Now you have 10 million in cash, but you also have an additional $3 million worth of assets and property. So really we're 3 million up on the asset side. And if you think of like a company, it would be 3 million additional in retained earnings. So I would say we have that cushion. Why not return, or in a way return some of it to the taxpayers by using some of that cushion that we have to cover next year's expenses, do a small tax increase, and then see what the revalue is. I think it's a little more palpable, you can swallow it a little easier as a taxpayer if you know, okay, I'm only having 3% go up versus 5 for 1 year and then breaking it up. But that was just my suggestion.
Because on the calculator, the 3 cents was what, $180 per household, I think it was. So I see your point, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's because you're not, to me, you're not coming, the net result, you still have 10 million plus in fund balance. It's just some of it's tied up in property. It's not as liquid, but, and I'm being very conservative, it's 3 million. I wouldn't say use 3 million of fund balance. Use maybe 2 million to cover yourself. Because again, if we do have a lease, you have to worry about, and that's something we might have to discuss later about, like, what's the breakage fee? If we do get into a bind and we want to sell.
Good with option 3 and 4.
And each with the caveat or the extension of what the mayor asked about expenditures. So I guess Alex can you bring forward those two scenarios to the council later in the spring? Or do you really need them to get to one and one only?
Yeah, I think we can make it work either way. It'd be helpful if we get to one, and the reason I say that is because we're gonna be getting to the point in the near future where we're going to be firming up all the line item numbers. And I think that's something I'm hearing that you want to see. You want to go through and make sure things are low and cut on the operational side. And I don't know if we're there yet, just because we don't have all the information, whether it's the tax base number, outstanding insurance, there's a number of things. We can do it either way. Just keep in mind, if we go through and create two whole budgets at this point, it might be, it's gonna be incomplete. So as I talk it out, I'd probably suggest, would y'all be willing to focus on one? If we were with that one going to add in those expenditure cuts, I think the number I saw was somewhere between $160,000 to $240,000.
Yeah, that was the number I threw out there, yeah.
So if we were to zone in on one of these scenarios, we were to add in those cuts, thinking out loud, because we're still at the big level, right? We don't want to jump around. We want to stay up top. Once we do that, it'll allow me as your manager to create the full line item budget. Time will pass, so we'll have more information when it comes to tax-based numbers, insurance, things like that. So I'll be able to come back and present y'all with a full line item budget. And I think as far as really the difference in the two scenarios is just a 3-cent tax number, right? Well, really a 2-cent tax number in the first year, right? Because you're going 5 cents in 24, 25 to 3 cents in the other scenarios. So it's really a 2-cent difference. So to me, I don't know if there's a need to create two separate budgets, just because we can easily move the number
They're so
up and
close,
down.
huh?
Yeah.
So that'd be my thought, is if we could zone in on one, and if you don't feel comfortable, that's fine, right? We'll make it work. But I think if it'd be more helpful for me sitting in your chair to just have one thing to look at, and then I can adjust the tax rate number.
I'm gonna use the elephant in the room just to say it out loud. Because I know most of this board appears up for reelection next year. And the last time that many people were up for reelection, folks were real hesitant about raising any taxes during that year. So that's, I'm just stating the elephant in the room for everybody.
Taxes in 2 years ago, didn't we?
Yeah, and nobody said a word to me,
Okay, I mean,
but I'm not running for reelection, so.
Yeah. Well, I just know that the last time that most of the board was up for reelection, nobody wanted to raise taxes that year. And I think it was a reval year that year too, so,
Yeah, it went up,
and so, you know,
yeah, you can't worry about that. I mean, I
No, no.
mean, you just do what's best for the town, but, we're not Washington, or we're not making a ton of money here.
yeah.
74,000
Plus,
plus 50,000.
whatever else they do to get to the millionaires.
I like Graham's proposal for right now, because it keeps the tax rate low this year, lets us see what the revalue is, and then we can have a discussion next year about that.
All right, we got 2 for that one.
3.
I like 3.
You like the 5?
Yeah.
All right, so that's 3. Well, Lori?
Well, I just looked and I didn't get the email, so I don't, I wasn't able to look at everything beforehand. So, I don't know. I don't have an opinion.
Well, we got 3 to 1 and 1, so, looks like we're going.
And I bet you Graham's gonna go with the scenario that he chose. So, I mean, so you're the tiebreaker here, so the pressure's
The
on
grand
you.
plan.
The pressure's on you. The pressure's on.
Well, yeah, I've already counted him.
He's already counted it.
He's already
Oh,
counted.
no, I was just giving Lori a hard time.
Well, and the thing is, like Alex said, once he gets the budget done, then you can push
yeah,
a
you
button
can-
and plug a
just plug
5 in.
Yeah, we're not,
Put that number in, it's
yeah,
not
we're
a
not tied to that. Plus,
whole thing.
we do have the CIP routine services. We're not tied to that number as well. So when they break, everybody has the CIP sheet that lists out each project. So somebody have to, wait till next year.
Well, I think the yellow line though is, if you wait next year, you'll have twice as much in that yellow line for next year.
Why?
Because those things are pretty much every year.
Well, now, wait a minute. If my man wins in November, gas goes back down to $1.94. Tell me it won't.
I don't think it's gonna happen,
Pipeline's open. We can't forecast things like that, but that's what I see.
but I mean, but that number there is pretty much, I mean, it pretty much is fixed. I mean, that's, most of that 400,000 is buying the 3 cop cars that we buy every year. So, I mean, if you put that off, you're gonna have to buy 6 cop cars next year.
Well, the routine service is 2.2 million. I know
Um,
the net is 477.
so where is that at? Routine services, yeah,
The CIP, 2.2 million, so,
okay, I see what you're saying.
so.
What I'm hearing, just to confirm, what I'm hearing, y'all let me know if I'm hearing this correctly, is the scenario the board would like staff to create the budget on is scenario number 4. Includes somewhere between, the scenario that's up on the screen there, includes somewhere in $160,000 to $240,000 in expenditure cuts to bake into that, and come back, I believe it's in April, full line item budget to present to the board for your consideration, and then we can continue on.
Alex, how'd you come up with that $240,000 of expenditure cuts already?
That was my number.
Mayor's email, just an estimate.
Because my
2%
suggestion
cut.
is you go through the departments and eliminate as much or as little as needed without cutting services.
Okay.
That's my thought. I don't want to cut services.
What,
The big dollar items that we have are garbage and public safety. They're pretty much fixed, aren't they?
Yes, sir.
can
Yeah.
somebody give me an example of expenditure cuts, like not salaries and not asphalt or
Sure.
like what?
That's a good question. So, and let me say this, is that we're operating conceptually right now. While we've got some budgets that we've created internally, there's still a lot of information that we don't have. Again, you've heard me, not to repeat myself, insurance, vendor costs, things like that. So, gas, for example, maybe we look at the gas line item and say, all right, maybe we look at supplies and materials and say, okay, how much did we spend last year? Is that something we might be able to decrease? Legal fees, is that something we could get by with decreasing a little bit? I think for me to go in and make those, I don't know, but I suspect, and the reason I suspect is because last year when we did the budget, we went back and kind of did the cut bus. You remember that's the kind of moniker we use. We go in and we make cuts as much as we can without services. And when we did that, exactly what the board directed. There wasn't a lot of fluff that was, of course, hidden in the budget, right? We cut it as best we could. So the numbers that we're escalating are going to be numbers that we already think are pretty lean. Now, when we get in there and I get in there with a fine-tooth comb, there'll be some numbers that I can cut, no doubt. I don't think it'll get up to the $160 to $240,000 number. We would have to cut into services, you know, things like the road maintenance budget. That's the obvious one, I think. It's not really or you could, push that cost in the future. You could do something like taking police vehicles, you know, pushing those off into the future, other things, that's just a couple examples that have came to my head. But I guess there's two approaches I could take. I could either say, all right, I'm gonna cut as much as I can without cutting services. Or I could hit the number, the 160 to 240 number, and I might have to cut back in some services. Those are the two options. Happy to do it either way. And if I might be able to get in there, I might be able to cut more than I think, right? I don't know right now, and I don't want to mislead you. So, yeah.
What are the big numbers we're waiting on? You keep saying we don't quite have these yet. They will be coming in.
The big one
What
is
are
the
they?
ad valorem property tax base number.
That number up there is last year's, but it's not,
It's estimated.
not
yes,
the
sir.
current. We'll know that in the next.
By the time I submit a budget to y'all in April, we'll know that. The big things are insurance numbers. I believe we've got some back. They're preliminary, but we should have those back in the next few weeks. But I think a lot of things that are outstanding will become more firm in over the next 3 weeks or so. There are some outstanding items. Happy to do it either way.
Oh, yeah, I did do it both ways. And, you know, use your discretion and bring us your decisions and.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll create one with just cutting what I can, and then I'll have an option. I won't create a separate budget, but I'll have an option if you want to cut into services. Here's some things. That way it won't be, I just don't want to give you two separate budgets. That sounds confusing, right? Yeah. All right. Got it. Thank y'all.
But you don't want, you want to wait till April 6th, what is it, April 19th to do that? Or as you,
Probably get it to you quicker than that. I would
well,
think.
as you get it, I mean, no rush, but,
I'm a week ahead now. I'm presuming here
yeah, now that
in
we
my
got down
mind
to.
that we
now-
don't need to meet next week.
Right,
Is that
now
a
that we
fair
got-
assumption?
Yeah, now that we got down to one, right. All right,
Good job.
all right, good.
Good job. You worked through a lot of stuff over the last 2 months, so I commend you for that. All right, I think we're good on the budget. Alex, anything else?
No, I appreciate everybody's time and effort coming to these meetings earlier, the commitment to getting it right, to listening to each other. Thank you to Kurt, Aaron, and all our staff for working through everything. Marcia, thank you.
All right, do we need a motion?
Well, I do have one
Oh,
item,
go
just
ahead.
real quick on the expenses. Do we have any big contracts coming up this year? Wondering, like, negotiate maybe a little bit lower.
Yeah, a lot of our, I wouldn't say there's one that we maybe negotiate. A lot of the bigger contracts we do are kind of bidding out. And we're kind of, like, for example, we've got road maintenance coming up. It's on the agenda for tonight. So that's the one that strikes me. I don't think there's anything, most of our bigger contracts, again, are kind of we bid out. You're required to go with the lowest responsive bidder.
Now, we did, when the quad was developed between Indian Trail, Matthews, Mint Hill, and us, you know, the first thing we talked about was garbage. At that point, Mint Hill was their garbage service with a local guy, and they didn't want to switch. Now they've gone to Waste Pro, a national firm. So the quad's sort of hanging on by its thread for its lifeline, but I don't know who Indian Trail's with. They're with a national firm too.
I believe they have the same
Yeah, I think it's
firm as us.
Yeah, so I don't know if that saves a lot of money. If Guys got 2 towns versus 4, but to me it makes sense, but, I'll bring it up in the next quad meeting if we ever have another one.
I know.
a better contract than Indian
Well, then we'll let you do the negotiation. Yeah, we'll let you do it.
Aaron does a great job for us.
All righty. Can I get a motion? To adjourn, motion by Mr. Shoal, second by Mr. Ayers, all in favor?
Aye.
And if you haven't eaten, the town has supplied us some sandwiches back in the back, and we got about 20 minutes.